But there was something remarkable about the parkour community because the way that we imagine spaces. And then what happens when you take on that view, it's really almost Matrix-like moment. The world is completely different now. You walk through the world and you see that's a gap that I could jump. That's a wall that I could climb. That's a descent that I could do. That makes the world fundamentally richer because it's now imbued with the potential for play and self-development everywhere you go. One of the arguments that I make is that in this search for meaning that we're talking about, when the world itself, the physical world, affords more potentials for relationship, that is fundamentally a more meaningful life, right? Because when I walk by a wall, it has more meanings. It is not simply a barrier. It is potentially a dance partner.
Hello and welcome to 21st Century Vitalism. This is a podcast exploring how to best maintain a sense of energy, inspiration, and wakefulness while navigating the complexities of the modern world. My name is Brett Kane, and I'll be your host on this journey as we have a multidisciplinary conversation with a wide variety of speakers from all around the globe. This typically includes spiritual teachers, somatic practitioners, artists, activists, and a whole slew of other visionaries and oddballs that I feel are bearing this torch well. If you're a returning listener, then you'll know that a central pillar of what holds this show up is a commitment to practices that help us become more embodied. That is to say, have a greater awareness of where our physical body is in space at any given moment. There are a lot of paths up that mountain, and I do believe that there is a movement style out there for everybody. Whether it's the gentle yoga flow or a fierce mixed martial art, I feel that it's a crucial element of any journey of self-discovery to relate to the body in as many ways as is allowed by our unique incarnations. One of the most interesting movement practices that I've come across is that of parkour. In case this word is new to you, this is the art of quickly traversing an environment, negotiating obstacles by running, jumping, and climbing. It's pretty sick to watch, and the limited amount of time I've spent doing it was a lot of fun. So I figured for today's episode, we would sit down with parkour teacher, martial artist, and founder of the Evolve Move Play platform, Rafe Kelley. Having over 20 years of movement practice under his belt and an extensive host of offerings guiding students into their bodies, Rafe has gone on to create a unique approach to the parkour practice, one that uses the natural world as its training ground. With this as a foundation, Rafe is expanding out to ask the bigger questions of life. What does it mean to lead a meaningful life, and can movement practice help us connect with a deeper sense of aliveness? It's a great intersection for someone like me, and I honestly found this chat to be exceptionally interesting. So if you want to check out Rafe's offerings beyond this conversation, check out evolvemoveplay.com or his socials of the same name. There's a ton of content for you to poke through, including some sweet videos of his movement exploits. Going forward, if you want to support this show, you can head on over to patreon.com/21stcenturyvitalism and consider becoming a member. Any little bit helps me keep this show moving forward. Thank you so much for those who have already hopped on. I know right now finances might be a little tricky, so if that is not in the cards for you, you're also welcome to head on over to YouTube. You can subscribe there, like the video, leave a comment, do whatever it is that you do to let the creators you watch know you love them. We also have Apple Podcasts, which you can leave a review on. Literally any little thing is a huge help. I'm probably most active on Instagram, so you're also welcome to join me on there as well. There are some cat videos and other great little things. So that is what we're going to be doing today, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. Without further ado, please sit back, drink some tea, do some stretches. Most importantly, open your hearts for Rafe Kelley. Okay, Rafe, so we are now live. As I always start the show, I just want to say thank you so much for giving me some of your time. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a little bit now. So how are you doing today?
Pretty good overall, there's a lot going on in our culture, which is concerning at the moment. So definitely feel that a little bit on my heart as we kind of get started. But the sun is shining. Blue skies. My kids are outside jumping on the trampoline. Life's really good with my wife and my kids. I'm healthy and strong and having great times jumping around. So I really shouldn't be
Yeah.
able to complain too much.
Yeah, I love to hear it. I'm glad that you're bringing in a little bit of the energy of the greater context that we're having this conversation in, because I also have been feeling it in my heart, and I really do think that topics like we'll be exploring today are a really great antidote, not the full solution, but something that can really help ground people more in the immediacy of their moment, which I think really helps us anchor to sanity a little bit, which is in short supply these days. So yeah, I'm very open to that energy being present and just kind of calling that in. I think it's important for these kinds of dynamics.
Yeah, absolutely. So.
Yeah. So, I wanted to start off, I've recently kind of stumbled across your platform, and I've been kind of exploring a lot of the material you have out there, but I didn't really get a good sense of how you got into the world of embodied movement practice. So I'd love to kind of hear a little bit more about you and kind of how you came to develop your platform, the Evolve, Move, Play, because it really is
Yeah.
one that it just has so many cool pillars to it. And I just feel like there's a unique story there.
Yeah, it's a unique story. I mean, it's kind of it's not, that could be a whole podcast episode just on like that or a memoir, because a lot of my life kind of like points in this one direction. Like I don't have this one moment where like, boom, everything changed and I was on one path and this thing threw me off this other path. I started training martial arts when I was 6 years old. My parents were both yoga teachers. I was raised in the counterculture. I was exposed to, forms of indigenous spirituality and all sorts of new age mysticism, and a lot of it was bullshit. And that also had its shadow side for me. I started training. I did a lot of rough and tumble play with my brother and my cousins and other boys around the neighborhood. And that was one of the most important ways that I connected with my dad as a kid. And then I started training gymnastics when I was 15. Got really into basketball, track and field. I was homeschooled, so I didn't get to like go out and compete in these things. But I was really, taken with them, and I was practicing on my own, and I just had a real ethic of wanting to push my body from an early age. And then ended up getting hired as a gymnastics coach in my early 20s, 21. And then through that, when I started discovering parkour, I kind of was already a coach and was already working with people. And so became part of the earliest generation of parkour teachers in the world. Have been doing that for 21 years now. 20 years. Somewhere along those lines. I think it's 20 actually this year. And then that led me kind of by my late 30s to like this curiosity. I was also interested in the early development of CrossFit, which is this real generalist idea of movement. And so that became a source of kind of an interaction between parkour, martial arts, CrossFit, the ancestral health paradigm, and trying to put all those things together. Research on play, the work of Frank Forencich, Stuart Brown, my own background as an anthropology student, and my wife's background as an anthropology student. All these are kind of like taken me in a direction, by the time I'm turning 30. And then the question of like, what is the really highest purpose of a movement practice? That's partially inspired by encountering the work of Ido Portal as well. And then Jordan Peterson became a really big inspiration for me around 2016, 2017. And that whole idea that we're ultimately oriented towards meaning. That's the highest thing that we can be oriented towards. And this idea of the hero's journey and recognizing that's really encapsulated in what we do in parkour. And then as I started to talk about and share those ideas with people, I had various other interesting traditions coming and finding me and sharing, and students who came from somatics and from the wilderness awareness school tradition and from yoga, and saying, oh, this thing that you're saying, it sounds a lot like this. Like, have you heard of a Moshe Feldenkrais? Have you heard of ecosomatics? Have you heard about Peter Levine? Have you heard about Bessel van der Kolk? And like, a lot of times I'm starting to just not even encounter these thinkers directly, but so many people who come and find my work are sharing their ideas with me that it's just sort of going into the stew of what's happening. And then, of course, through Jordan, it was Jordan Peterson who shared the first lecture of Awakening from the Meaning Crisis on Twitter, and that pulled me into John's world. And I had just missed the opportunity to kind of develop a connection with Jordan early on. And so when I saw John, I was like, okay, this is like, I can't wait. I have to really build that connection right away. And so I interviewed him early, like 7 episodes into Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, and developed a really deep friendship with him through that. So I don't know. That's a part of the story anyways.
Yeah. It's one of the tributaries, if you will.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is maybe the most unique, and there's a lot there, but just the practice of parkour is something that I think a lot of people may see digitally, but don't really participate in, because the high risk that's often associated with it. And from my perspective, there is kind of a countercultural element of it, because it's often in places that are not designed for people to be doing that kind of thing. So what was that like for you when you were first kind of getting into that practice? I imagine that there's a lot of subtle transformations that are taking place just in the way that you perceive environments, not just as like, that's a building, that's a ledge, but as like, that is a tool that I can propel my body across. How did that process kind of settle for you?
Yeah. So I think, parkour, unfortunately, the easiest way to gain attention as someone who practices parkour is through really high danger stunts. Let's say we use the difference between danger and risk. So risk is, let's say, the probability that something's going to go wrong. Danger is what happens if it goes wrong. Well, most people don't have that distinction in their head, and they don't have an understanding of how you calibrate risk down in response to danger. So it's used to be something that people had to do a lot more, right? If you work with a lot of high level construction people who work in, building scaffolding 60 floors up, right? They understand this really intentionally. It's like, okay, I gotta do this every day. Right. And I know how to make the likelihood of failure so low that I can do that sustainably as a career. But when people see it from outside, they don't understand the difference between a kid who's just totally crazy, who's just sending a jump and has a high likelihood of bouncing off, and somebody who knows exactly how far they can jump, knows exactly what their body feels like at a given rate, knows exactly how close they can get to the edge without having catastrophic failure be likely. So parkour, despite what it looks like from the outside, is actually a very safe sport. Our injury rates are really low compared to comparable sports like snowboarding, skateboarding, surfing. Even like really standard mainstream sports like soccer have like twice the injury rate that parkour has. Parkour is fundamentally just human locomotion expressed in a diversity of environments where you're looking for challenge. We run, we jump, we climb, we move under things, we roll. Every child basically does this as part of their play. And so all we're doing is now saying, how far can we take that? How much can we gain? And essentially, we are tapping back into this fundamental play state that every child has, and really every human has. But as adults, we tend to forget it in our culture. And part of the reason we forget it is because we move through spaces that are designed to be very easy to move through and that have very strong social, social rules around how the space is used. So, like, I've been very influenced by the work of J.J. Gibson and the ideas of affordances and constraints. So, if you look at a wall, right, the intention of the wall is to constrain your movement and direct you down some other pathway. And it is a radical act in some way to say, no, now that wall is actually an affordance for developing my capacity to overcome walls.
Yeah, yeah.
And that is kind of the miracle that happened in France in the 1990s is in the early 1990s is that this group of kids, as they entered adulthood, didn't lose the mind of the child, and they held on to it, and they applied it really specifically to urban environments. Things like parkour had kind of always existed, right? In fact, when I first started training parkour, before I started training parkour, I was teaching gymnastics, and I taught an adult gymnastics class. And the first time I taught this class, they told me there was a particular student who I had to watch out for because he was doing weird stunts. So instead of practicing, classic tumbling runs with the rest of us, he was dive rolling over vault boxes or swinging between sets of uneven bars or doing swinging rings. And so when I discovered parkour, I told this guy, his name was Dane, about parkour. And he invited me out to go try it with him. And he had already done jumps all around town. Like he was like, oh, here's a jump that I've done. Here's a jump that I've done. Here's a climb that I've done. Like, let's go try this stuff together. And that happened for many people. Like Oleg Vorslav is widely considered one of the greatest parkour athletes of all time. He was discovered by the parkour community, basically playing on a playground he'd been playing on since he was a child, and he was like this genius of parkour who'd never even heard of parkour. And the same was true of Daniela Baca in many ways. So parkour always existed. People who do rock climbing, started doing buildering before parkour was discovered, and sometimes to get from one place to another, they were climbing. They were running up walls. They were jumping between buildings to get to a climb. And then, of course, rock climbers who climb out in nature have been scrambling and jumping and running to get from one place to another forever. But there was something remarkable about the parkour community because they really reimagined the urban space as affording this very specific kind of practice that was inflected by watching Jackie Chan movies and, Dragon Ball Z and ninja movies and all that stuff, right? And it's like, okay, we're going to actually practice this and we're going to do it in the city. And that was kind of a revolution. Yeah. So it is a counterculture. It is a counterculture in a way to the way that we imagine spaces. And then what happens when you take on that view, I don't know if it's so profound now as it was in the beginning, but for the first pioneering generation, it really felt like this almost Matrix-like moment of like you're just, the world is completely different now. Yeah. You walk through the world and you see that's a gap that I could jump. That's a wall that I could climb. That's a descent that I could do. And that makes the world fundamentally richer. Yeah. Because it's now imbued with the potential for play and self-development everywhere you go. And so one of the arguments that I make is that in this search for meaning that we're talking about, when the world itself, the physical world, affords more potentials for relationship, that is fundamentally a more meaningful life, right? Yeah. Because when I walk by a wall, it has more meanings. Right? It is not simply a barrier. It is potentially a dance partner.
Yeah.
And there's many disciplines that open these kind of portals or windows to greater meaning. Like I think about my primary parkour practice is in trees and in nature more generally, but I really like moving in trees. And so I view a tree and I see that I can jump from one branch to another, that I can swing from one branch to another, that I can rapidly climb it, that I can do a climb up on a limb. And someone who doesn't have a practice like that, when they walk by the same tree, they don't have any invitation from the tree, right? The tree doesn't have the same connection for them. They don't have the same potential for relationship with the tree. But that's not the only potential for relationship that a tree offers, right? A lot of my students come from the wilderness awareness school tradition. And so for them, the tree is also maybe a place where they could forage for fruit or eggs or honey, right? Or could harvest fiber for rope making, or could harvest timber, and they would know what kind of timber it is and what it's good for fire making, for building houses. My father was an architect, so for him, he saw the shapes of trees offering the potential for art, and he knew the qualities of different kinds of wood and what they were used for in different parts of a house. So all of those are capacities for relationship and understanding and depth of connection with the world. The world is more real for somebody who is an architect who works with natural structures. The world is more real. It's more realized, in the way Vervaeke uses that term, for somebody who is a wilderness skills expert. It is more realized for someone who is a parkour expert. Yeah. And that is actually one of the fundamental sources of meaning in life that so many people are missing, because they're the parts of the world that they can relate to in a meaningful way with a high level of affordances are collapsing more and more to their smartphone and their laptop. So that's my meditations on your question. It was a long meditation, but hopefully it was useful.
No, it is very useful, and it gets me to think a lot about, the current society that we live in, as you're saying, really is our primary relationship for so many of our basic fundamental needs as humans is consolidated into our phones or into our screens, our TVs, and the world, the tactile world that we interact with has really just shrunken so much. And I guess I'm wondering, from your perspective as somebody who engages with the world in all these different fashions, how do you view that kind of lived experience of somebody who is just so consolidated in so few things? I guess, what does that do to our organism and our mode of consciousness, and what are the effects of living such kind of constrained worlds?
Yeah. Well, I am also a westernized, digital age human being who has a smartphone and sits at a laptop and talks to people over the internet, and spent a lot of my professional life really on social media trying to build a brand. So I get to occupy both of these worlds. And I try not to, I suppose I try not to be too radical, right? Like someone coming from a perspective like mine, it'd be easy to sort of just demonize this new world. It's the devil, and it's here to destroy it. But it's like, well, we're using it for a reason. Yeah. And it affords us some pretty unique things. Parkour was spread by YouTube, right? Like I was able to carve this extremely unique career, to experience this incredible practice that has brought so much beauty to my life, and to connect with people from literally all over the world through something that I may have never known about if it wasn't for streaming video and the digital world and web forums. Yeah. So I think there's real utility to it. And what I remember about myself as a young person was that because of the way my mind worked, I found it very hard to find peers in the local community that I was in. And because of that, it was hard for me to actually develop fundamental social skills. And part of my training ground for just being a decent human being was finding online web forums of geeky people who really cared about Tolkien and Celtic history and anthropology.
Yeah.
And that was a huge gift to me to have access to those things. And so we still access those potentials for small groups of pioneer type people to begin to come together in community and to form a a sort of corporate body through the
Mm.
smartphone and the laptop. That's the meaning community. That's the John Vervaeke space, the liminal space, Jordan Peterson space. So we're using these tools because they afford us something really, really valuable and important. But like everything, like it's trade-offs.
Yeah.
And the trade-offs with our smartphones are perilous.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have the same experience I think a lot of people do, which is like you go to your phone to do something that's useful and that is developmental. And before you know it, you have forgotten what you're doing and you're doing something else. And your attention has been captured by some algorithmic process
Yeah.
that has been, that has hijacked your limbic system and brought you into one of these like fundamental deep states of like rage, self-righteousness, lust, hunger, right? Like, right, like let's go right to the base of the brainstem. And so we enter this world that's available to us at the digital, like with peril, and we don't fully know how to build hygiene for it and to build a way of doing it. And part of it is it just outcompetes the real, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's, a lot of research that's come out in the last few years, and I think some of it's getting pushed back or it's equivocal, the findings, but the broad sense that I've gotten from the research is that people are not succeeding in courtship, and like the rates at which people are forming sexual partnerships are going down. The amount of sex that people have within those partnerships is going down. Definitely the amount of babies is going down. The amount of warmth and love between the sexes is going down.
Yeah.
And part of this is because of the ubiquity of pornography.
Mm. Yeah.
We have the ability to satisfy an urge in a way that was simply not available to previous generations.
Yeah.
That then outcompetes the drive to go realize the reality of it. So every time that you satisfy a sexual urge through the internet is in some sense a lost opportunity to have a truly deep connection with another human being. Right? And now, if you're single and you don't have a partner, then maybe that opportunity for intimacy is just a conversation at a bar with somebody that you're trying to make a connection with. And maybe that's going to be a more frustrating and difficult experience. And it's not going to be as friction free, and maybe it'll be frustrating. Maybe you'll experience rejection, but that's actually real.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It actually is developmental. You learn something, right? When you go to a bar and you ask a girl out and she says no, like if you go back and you reflect on that, then maybe you know something about yourself, and maybe you're better positioned to achieve the thing that you're looking for. If you go to your computer and you bring Pornhub up, you don't learn anything except maybe what you like to consume on Pornhub.
Yeah.
And the same thing is true of like in many ways of social media and of video games, right? There are cheap ways of achieving like relational needs or motivational needs that end up becoming kind of developmental bottlenecks that prevent you from going out and doing the work of becoming a real human being.
Right. Right.
And so the internet can invite us into real relationship, right? You can find a partner through the internet. You can find a community through the internet. But it also threatens us with this peril of being trapped inside it.
Right.
There's a commentator, Catherine D., who said we should treat the internet like the realm of fairy.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? There are forces in there, and they're amoral. We don't know exactly what they're going to do to us, and we don't know how much time they're going to take from us.
Right.
We don't even know who we are on the other side of interacting with them. And that doesn't mean that there's not things to be gained there, but you better be cautious.
Yeah, I think bringing a level of awareness to your online interactions is crucial to be able to use it as a tool and not be used as a product yourself for these other kinds of
No.
companies to sell you things. And I like what you said about the idea that the internet kind of provides a frictionless experience. You
Yeah.
kind of use the lens of porn. There really is no potential threat of there
Mhm.
being any sort of like bad feeling. And I think that extends to pretty much like every kind of interaction on the internet. You watch a video, even like researching something, most of our research is done by just taking in other people's perspectives because
Mhm.
they've done the work of compiling instead of you learning those skills to be able to search your own experience and through other literary works. You're just relying on somebody else's processing power. And what I really appreciate about your platform and the emphasis on movement is that it puts you in a space in which you have to meet with friction, whether
Mhm.
that's the threat of potential injury or whether it's rejection or just any sort of uncomfortability. I think that that's really when you learn where your boundaries are. And that's how you kind of help define who you actually are. When we're on the internet, we're kind of amorphous. When
Mhm.
we're like chronically online, I think we just don't have any sort of boundary between ourselves and the world. And we think of ourselves in very particular ways. And then because we're not meeting it in the external world, that's just how it is until you're actually met in a situation. And we're talking at a point right now where violence is kind of at an all-time high with some pretty big things happening. And I think that the chronic online use is maybe more of a indicator of violence than any sort of political affiliation. It's
Mhm.
actually most of these people who are coming out and doing stuff like this are chronically online and frustrated and have, at least they perceive there to be no access to any sort of resource that makes them more realized
Mhm.
and more actualized. And yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. And I think like pursuing ways in which we could experience boundary and friction is kind of the grist for the mill of becoming more alive.
Yeah. There's an interesting sort of like uh, polarity maybe that you're pointing to that is sort of occurring to me in the conversation, which is this like on one hand you have an idea like self-actualization, which is to realize what is unique about you and to be able to live into or lean into and grow your unique potential. And on the other pole, let's call it NPC, right?
Yeah, yeah,
There's a way in which the individual can offer themselves to be captured by forces that are greater than them and can become just a sort of part of of a of a corporate body,
yeah.
right? So that with Charlie Kirk's Killer, the great debate is: was he captured by an ideology? And if so, which ideology is it? And then which of our big ideological camps is to blame for the existence of that ideology? Have you read Jordan Peterson's book, Maps of Meaning?
I haven't read Maps of Meaning, but I did go through 12 Rules for Life back in like 2018, maybe.
To be frank, I don't think 12 Rules for Life is a particularly useful book.
Yeah, yeah. It was very pop psychology,
Yeah,
which at the time was
yeah,
helpful,
sure.
but
If
yeah.
you've listened to his lecture series online, I don't think there's a lot that you get out of reading 12 Rules for Life that you didn't already get in the lecture series. And in fact, I think the book almost doesn't hang together without the lecture series.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think you kind of are actually relying on the lecture series to make the book make
Yeah,
sense.
you're like,
That's my
wait, this is
personal
a
read
little
on it.
vague. Gotta kind of look. Yeah,
But
yeah.
Maps of Meaning is actually an extraordinary book. It's very difficult to read. It took me about a year to read. It's super
Mm.
dense. It's very useful. I think it's one of the most profound books of the last 50 years, at least. And I think that everybody in this space should read it. There's a portion in it called about apprenticeship. And the idea is that we sort of identify ourselves based on our parents and our family as we are children. And before we can kind of actualize a real identity, an actualized self identity, we have to go through apprenticeship. And So there's a, so for me, like parkour is part of the apprenticeship, right? Like I subsume my identity and I voluntarily kind of seek out the potential for this, let's call it an egregoric force to colonize me. I don't want at this, when I'm 25, to be creating my own parkour. I want to be able to embody the parkour that was passed down to me, the lineage of parkour. I want to know what it is. I want to fully participate in it. And in participating in it, I get to participate in this broader body of people, right? And if I go my own way with it at that stage, then I don't have the same potential to participate with other people. And that's a real thing that we all, it's a real developmental need, I think, that people have. And one of the dangers of the current internet is that it offers us really profoundly meaningful feeling identities that we can participate in, that can then colonize us. And the social media, the way that it's created and its capacity to entrain attention and to capture really deep motivational and emotional systems, allows it to sort of colonize us in a particularly powerful way, right? If you read the New York Times, you will be colonized by a specific perspective. If you read the NPR, you'll be colonized by a perspective. Same for Fox News or the Wall Street Journal or whatever it is. We become high agency people when we can see the lens by which we are viewing the world and begin to acquire a variety of lenses that allow us to create our own unique map of the world. And the internet is amazing for that if you know how to use it. But it's uniquely powerful at sort of entrapping us in myopic perspectives. And that's ultimately, what I think killed Charlie Kirk. And I'm relatively more conservative, and I admired lots of things about Charlie. I think that his willingness to dialogue and the degree to which he could hold himself in good faith and in sort of a positive emotional frame with people who disagree with him was actually really profound and really necessary for our culture. And but at the same time, he's also a voice of a specific kind of colonizing force,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And there is a danger also in the collapse of perspective
Right.
that he's trying to invite people into. And so I understand why some people see him and see the opposite of what I see, right? They see the threat of sort of conservative mimetics that they think are fundamentally misaligned with reality and human well-being.
Yeah.
And he was an extraordinarily articulate and powerful voice for those mimetics.
Mm-hmm.
And what those mimetics mean is something that I might dispute with a lot of those perspectives, and and then the value and power of the way in which he was playing that role. But I do think that there's a real ambivalence in the role of these firebrand dialogue characters. Even Jordan Peterson is the same to me, right? Like I feel like Jordan Peterson is one of the most profound teachers that's available out there, who has had some of the most profound effect on my worldview of anyone who's out there. And I don't listen to him anymore and haven't for several years. And I find it quite difficult to consume his content, even if I try now.
Really?
Because I think that he was captured to a significant, not completely, but to a very significant degree, like conservative ink,
Yeah.
like colonized him. And in some other sense, like he was so wounded by the shadow side of the left
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
his
These are
reactivity
all,
captured him.
yep. And I mean, he really was kind of the main guy that a lot of people were really focusing their ire on for a
Yeah.
long time. And
Yeah.
you can argue about the rightness, the wrongness. One of the things that I wanted to bring up that I think is interesting is this idea of apprenticeship and how we've kind of, again, outsourced that to the internet, and how
Hmm.
we take in these very specific views and we get locked in algorithmically. And I think what I find interesting is like a part of apprenticeship is embodied, typically,
Hmm.
generally speaking, is you're working with someone in a very intimate way and they're showing you like a skill or a trade or a practice. And you're generally, I mean, for most of human history, it's been in person. But
Yeah.
with this now, we're apprenticing to ideologies that don't really offer avenues for a somatic expression of whatever that ideology is. So whether you're left or whether you're right and you're consuming this, you don't have somebody taking you into the political process to be able to express what your all this energy you're building up, and to do it a right way and actually walk you through what that process looks like, whether it's dialogical or whether it's through protest, whatever it is that that ideology kind of espouses. It just kind of like loads you up with all of this energy, and then it doesn't really take any responsibility for channeling it. So I
Hmm.
think, we just see, and that's why I think like the more fundamental thing beyond left and right is just kind of like the somatic experience of people who are often isolated. They don't have any mentors. They're just kind of soaking in whatever slop content comes down the pipe, and
Yeah.
the quality definitely gets worse and worse as you kind of get locked in. So I
Hmm.
think that's a big part of it, is we're again, we're not really connecting with each other, and I think that that's also a big part of the breakdown of the political divide that we're experiencing. Is it oftentimes, I feel like in history, it's like your boss may be conservative, you might be liberal, or vice versa, and you have to find a way to connect and communicate, and you still learn from them the skill or trade that you're learning. But now we can isolate ourselves, and we don't actually have to be in a space with people that we disagree with. So it's so much easier to be fearful of that. And it's a somatic thing. It's like, how do you manage your own body in disagreement with somebody else? And we're just losing those opportunities just more and more, and now it's like
Yeah.
reaching this fever pitch, and it's just, I feel like, getting harder.
Yeah. It's really, I think there's like two different drivers that are really important. One is that people um, are kind of they're physically underdeveloped. They are atrophied and weak at a somatic level too. Like it's not just that their muscles aren't strong enough, but the muscle strength is associated with a kind of somatic resilience. And when you take children and you sit them in a cage for 8 hours a day, and then put them in a series of other cages, and then distract them with screens for almost the entirety of their life. And so they don't roughhouse, and they don't climb and jump, and they don't do any kind of physical labor. They're not helping out on the farm. They're not working with animals. They're literally like consuming disembodied information almost all day, every day, without any with almost no sort of skin in the game experience of reality. I think that creates a type of person who fundamentally is much more threatened by reality. Everything is more fear inducing because they just don't know what it's like for there to be consequences. They just don't know where the actual constraints and affordances are in the environment. So that's one thing. And then on the other, I think that it is actually true that the worst aspects of both sides are worse than they've ever been. And so it is easier to, well, maybe not ever. This isn't the 1930s yet.
Yeah.
We're on the pathway. So let's not over exaggerate, but at least over the period of my life and, probably the previous, 30 years or more, we've reached a pitch of hypocrisy and of sacrifice of principle and of just morally misguided ideas on both sides that make it harder and harder to look across the aisle and say, I can forgive you for that. And I can enter into good faith dialogue with you. And then it's harder and harder to then turn around and look at the people who are on your, or shoulder to shoulder with you and say, oh, and that thing that you're advocating, that's not okay either. And I need to help you. We need to self-police. I had this analogy the other day. I was talking to a dear relative of mine about some really difficult topics in the political realm. And I just wanted her to be able to hear where I was coming from. But there's a certain point at which it was like I could see she got full and it was all that she could manage. And then it flipped and she was just irate about conservatives and she couldn't hear at all anymore. And it was like nothing that her side did could matter but what about the other side? And so I was thinking about it afterwards, and I had this vision basically of a horde of orcs, right? There's a horde of orcs pouring down from the hills, and you know that if they get a hold of your village, they're gonna like rape all your daughters and take all the adults and cook them over the fire and eat them, right? And there's a bunch of soldiers, and they're ready to protect you from the orcs. And well, it turns out these soldiers, maybe they get a little handsy with the girls in the village. Maybe they're stealing a little bit of extra money. Maybe there's not as much food around because they're eating more than their share. And you keep forgiving them because they're protecting you from the orcs. And eventually we're just normalizing more and more of that. And that's essentially where I think both sides find themselves. Their warriors are becoming more and more orc-like.
Yeah.
But they don't care because they feel like they're necessary to protect them from the orcs that are coming from the other side. And I find it, even though, I've done martial arts my whole life, I do parkour all the time. I'm not, the world shouldn't be particularly physically threatening to me, but there are issues for me that I have with the left that, it's the first time I feel like in my life when I start to have these conversations and I'm like, it's hard for me to want to be friends with people who disagree with me.
Yeah.
And I haven't felt like that. I've always been really good at being friends with people. I've been forced to. I live in Bellingham, Washington. I lived in Seattle for 11 years. I never had the ability to sort of socially build an ideological safe space for myself.
Right.
That's changing, right? More and more of the people around me see the same things that I see. I suppose I live in a community of refugees from wokeness.
Yeah.
And yet a lot of my friends and family are also still sort of seemingly unable to open their eyes to what that ideology actually looked like and meant and how it impacted the world. And that's getting harder and harder for me to let go of and forgive. And, we can turn the tables and say, okay, well, the FCC director shouldn't be, it's absolutely against the most fundamental principles of the United States for the FCC director to be threatening legal action to try to get rid of Jimmy Kimmel for that. And if you're worried that we're on the pathway to fascism, that's a big prior that's getting confirmed right now.
Yeah.
And if you look at some of the actions that ICE is taking, right? Again, so I understand. I understand why. I can empathize with why someone from the other side would feel just as alienated from me as I feel from them.
Yeah.
And how that makes it so easy to not want to hold your own side to account.
Right.
And so the somatic threat of our politics, I think it's partially because we're weaker, but it's also because the problems are harder. And that's a really difficult place to try to fix things from.
Yeah. I've noticed what I find to be really interesting is it seems like within our culture, especially in the realm of entertainment, I feel like I'm trying to find the right words for this, but I feel like everything is getting louder or more apparent or more obvious in order to capture our attention. I feel like there's been this kind of process over the past decade or 15 years of kind of getting more and more numb to sensation, primarily because everything is available right at our fingertips at all times. We can hit a button and look at somebody getting shot We can look at people dying. We can have like the craziest, loudest music. We can have porn right at our fingertips. And I think what this does over time is it desensitizes our nervous system. And when that happens, we lose the ability to see nuance and subtlety. And I think we tend to gravitate towards things that are a little bit more extreme or obvious because it's the only thing that can elicit some sort of response from us. So I think what we're kind of seeing from this central problem of just overstimulation, overconsumption is kind of, we need more. We need to have more sugar in whatever the thing is that we're consuming in order to feel like we're actually getting satiated. So I think that that's kind of bleeding out into even our political discourse as well. And I think what I really appreciate about what you're doing, and just like the movement thing, I think returns the degree of subtlety somatically by relating to ground and space and your body and how you move through things. And it brings you back into proper relationship with your sensations and your perception in a way that we are totally at disconnect with. And I think that more violence, whether it's verbal, whether it's physical, I think that that's just an outcropping of this sense of disconnection from ourselves and our community and our world. We're just pleading for something real. And sometimes it's a punch to the face. Sometimes it's, it's going out and doing something crazy, and I think especially with the youth who look out at this landscape and see just the chaos and the fighting. And also, I mean, some of the material conditions of our society and the world are very questionable. So I could see how people are they're trying to go for the most loud, extreme expression because they don't have access to their bodies and their environment and community. And
yeah, there's a couple ideas that I wanted to pick up on there. One is desire for a confrontation with the real.
mm-hmm.
The first time I spoke with John Vervaeke, I framed our conversation around the movie Fight Club, right? Because Fight Club came when I was 19 years old, and I thought the trailer looked super weird. I had no idea what that was about. I didn't go see it, right? Then a friend was like, "You got to watch this movie," and we got together with like 5 friends. It was like, my core group of college friends, and we watched this movie, and it was like, what the hell, right? Like it captured me so deeply. That, and it was really like, that conversation where the narrator sits down with Tyler Durden and he starts talking about, his IKEA furniture. And Tyler Durden is like, what do you do? Like,
yeah.
And they go out and they punch each other. And it's like, oh yeah, this is it, right? And I'd been a martial artist for my whole life. And so it really spoke to this craving. And in fact, I started a boxing club at my community college after Fight Club came out.
After the movie? Yeah, wow.
Mm-hmm. So then I discovered parkour, and I went back and I watched the movie, and I realized that parkour was basically like a positive expression of, Fight Club. Because Fight Club was ultimately destructive, right? It was ultimately like, and it leads to Project Mayhem, right? Self-development is masturbation, right? That's a quote from Tyler Durden, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
And what parkour, especially early on, it was not just jumping. It was this idea that like we were going to cultivate ourselves into the type of people who could save somebody from a burning building, right? Be strong to be useful, build moral character. And so the whole idea is we go out and we intentionally confront the real, and we deal with positive struggle. And through that, we don't contribute to destroying each other or destroying the world. We contribute to becoming the type of people who can do good in the world. Now, I think part of it was really incomplete. Like the parkour community, in my opinion, unfortunately, has really been consumed by wokeness, right? Like they've really fallen for a lot of those memes and this desire to do good through, supporting things that I think are actually very questionable. But I understand that. And then in my own work and kind of like my own personal kind of path that I've been working through right now, I play a lot with the idea of effective bandwidth and effective affective buffering capacity. So affect being like the underlying thing beneath emotion, like what is the feeling states that we experience in our body. So how aware are you, and how much can you actually experience affect before you disassociate, before you reach for a numbing strategy? How intense can intense be? Along all these different dimensions, because you might be like very capable of dealing with the intense affect of anger and not very capable of dealing with intense affect when it comes to love, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or vice versa, or sadness versus whatever. And then, so you may have a highly intense experience of one of these states. Can you sort of stay integrated?
Yeah.
Can you not be taken over by your anger, or taken over by your lust, taken over by whatever experience it is? So one way that we always have, that we tend to use, is to numb or turn away from an experience of emotion. And then there's this other path, which is like to build a kind of structure to hold those experiences and to allow yourself to move through them. And what I've, been discovering is, I had a lot of numbing strategies, right? Like most people. Luckily I didn't fall for drugs or alcohol as numbing strategies, but I think a lot of my use of the internet, and particularly arguing with people on the internet, is actually like a numbing strategy for me.
Interesting.
And so I've been, dealing basically, my marriage came apart at the beginning of 2024. And in the wake of that, I had to kind of confront some of the ways that I behaved in my marriage that were not, that were really damaging to my wife. And I was able to sort of track them to this sort of underlying unresolved resentment and anger and hurt and shame around my sexuality, because I'd been a victim of sexual abuse in my early teens. And so it was like, if I wanted to be able to offer my wife the chance to come back into a relationship in a way where I could be sure that I would provide safety for her, I had to do the work. And to do the work meant going into, I did 6 weeks of internal family systems therapy, 6 days a week, plus 1 week of somatic therapy. And then I did MDMA therapy experience at the end of that, and then 2 more over the next, I guess, 5 months, something like that.
Yeah.
And what's happened through that is that I'm much more able to recognize and feel experiences of affect and emotion in myself. I'm much more sensitized to the somatic signals in myself and in other people. And I'm also I'm generally better able to buffer that, right? To be like, okay, I can hold on to myself. Like when I was in the MDMA experience, I basically got to experience, 30 years of repressed rage, disgust, and shame and fear. So I basically shook violently for 4 hours and screamed no and fuck and all these things, right? And so, like, I kind of know that I am able to walk through like a personal emotional hell in a really real way, and that I survived, and I came to the other side of it, and I'm still alive.
Yeah.
And so, like, when my wife has really intense, affective dysregulation, I'm like, okay, I can just hold you until that passes, and you can talk to me about whatever you need. And in the past, like, her intensity of emotion might trigger resentment in me. Why can't she just handle this? Why can't she just shut it down the way that I can shut it down?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't find myself in that place anymore. I don't get tired of her and her emotion anymore. And then the flip side is that I see her experience far more joy, far more intensity of love, far more of these other things. And it's like the capacity to open the bandwidth of negative emotion then has this reciprocal capacity to experience the depth of her positive emotion.
Yeah. Yeah.
The writer Khalil Gibran said in his book The Prophet, uh, our sorrows our sorrows carve the cup from which we drink our joys, or something. That's not the exact line, but it's like that,
It's
right?
still beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good collab there.
Yeah. Thank you. But I mean, just read him on joy and sorrow. It's absolutely beautiful. And it's real wisdom. But I would also say that that is making it harder for me to have some of these conversations with people because I feel it, I feel the intensity and the pain, and I feel the disassociation and alienation, right?
Yeah.
I don't, it's like there's a certain degree of sensitization at which you ex, you exceed your own capacity to hold your buffering.
Yeah.
And so we have to build both. Like we can't just sensitize people. We have to build their
Right.
capacity to buffer. And that's the kind of masculine pole of somatics that I don't think is well integrated yet. And that's where I think the parkour and the martial arts are so important, but they're not fully understood as somatic arts yet.
Right.
So
Yeah. No, I think that there's something there about becoming more sensitive to all the minuscule, or the fluctuation of emotions within us allows us to experience more joy. And, I study Buddhism pretty intensely, and I'm a practitioner of that to some degree. And I think like my current understanding is like joy arises when we're able to just allow things to move, like the whole spectrum of emotions, whether it's sadness, fear, happiness. Like I think happiness and joy are different things, but the more that we're able to experience all of it openly, that's
yeah,
when joy kind of arises. But like you're saying, like being able to create a container for that to arise in a safe way that's regarded with kindness is just like such a big thing. And my teacher's teacher, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, talks about enlightenment as being just this tender-hearted, like broken-heartedness almost, to where it's like a butterfly could flap its wings and you could start crying.
yeah,
So like that degree of sensitivity, and I really do think that that comes from not being afraid of yourself and being truly fearless in a way, which means to be able to experience fear without fear. And I think like what your experience that you're telling me, it really kind of has that kind of sense. And I think everybody's kind of got to find their own way to it, and there is no like one right paradigm. But I think there are some general guidelines that we can kind of suss out from everybody doing these things, which is kind of why my show is so multidisciplinary in nature. It's like I
yeah.
think a lot of the people I invite, I recognize a quality of that tenderness and that open-heartedness. And it's just fascinating to me in my chair because people from all around the world representing vastly different perspectives and worldviews, and there's still this thread of connection with humanity and reality that I just think is so profound. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing just that part of your story.
Yeah, you're welcome. I really believe that that I really it's funny, like there's part of me at least that really believes that in some fundamental sense, like if we could get men and women to fall in love with each other like properly, like a
Mm,
lot of our culture's problems would start to dissipate. That a lot of what we're seeing is a kind of war between an unbalanced masculine and unbalanced feminine, and that the way that we actually integrate those things happens in marriage and and family, right? That like the laboratory for the virtuous expression of the masculine and feminine is in relationship between men and women, in the sexual romantic relationship, the childbearing relationship, more so than anything else. It's the deepest, the most profound expression of it. And we're just really, I think, not doing a very good job of helping the sexes understand each other, helping the sexes have empathy for each other, helping the sexes have sensitization and awareness and deep
yeah.
listening for each other.
Yeah.
And then and then the children are raised in this world that doesn't have the integration of the male and of the father and the mother.
Yeah.
And then they're playing, they're trying to incorporate and figure out how to have those things in themselves in a way that works. And it's schizophrenic. It's schizogenic in like a Morris Berman type of kind of thinking. If you're familiar with Morris Berman,
I'm not. No.
yeah. Uh, it's a good idea. It's a very interesting idea, and unfortunately, I don't understand it well enough to sort of break it down for
Yeah,
you
I
right now.
appreciate the
But
confidence in that.
there's a little breadcrumb for people who are watching or for yourself. But this has become really a passion project for me since my marriage came apart and then came back together. Is I think that most of the marriages and relationships that I see around me are either bad or okay.
Mm-hmm.
They're getting by, but not thriving, or they're breaking down. And we were getting by and seemingly okay, at least for me, for a long time, and not okay for her. And I didn't really realize it. And now we're in this place where it's like, no, it's genuinely good. It's like, how are you doing? Really good. Like, I feel a sense of growing love and deeper gratitude and deeper connection in my marriage all the time. And it's like, man, I want that for people. And I see how it impacts our kids, and I see how it impacts even the people around us, people who come into our home and interact with us. It's like they carry something different when they walk away because they're like, oh, that's possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder how much of that kind of comes down to that kind of numbing quality that a lot of people have. I feel like a big part of relationships is having a sense of containment within yourself, understanding your individuality while maintaining connection with another person. And a lot of people come into it with the idea of like, we're going to complete each other. And then the boundaries get really fuzzy and they're not able to actually pick apart the granularity of what's theirs and what's their partner's. And then they lose responsibility for doing their own kind of work. And I think that that's probably a big part of what's allowing you to the process of a relationship falling apart and coming back together. Most people just let it fall apart. But I'd imagine that the coming together has probably in part come from your ability to do your own work too. You know, you've committed a life of practice. Right. Yeah. Vice versa and all that. But I think having that ability to really remember just your own situation, I think you meet in that way. And I think a lot of people just don't really have access to themselves. You know, I think that that's like a really big thing. And that's why I emphasize movement as a part of this platform, because I think movement, again, is a doorway into understanding your boundaries, understanding where you are in space and time, which allows you to actually look at the deeper layers of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that when you wrestle, you experience intensity. And then you can learn to be someone who can tolerate that intensity. When you dance, you develop the capacity to listen and to be sensitive. And you can learn that in the wrestling too, because you have to have a sustainable way of wrestling, right? And you can learn, and there's intensity in dance, right? You can dance in ways that are incredibly physically intense, and you can do it in a partnered way that takes you right to your edge. But they exist along different poles, where the wrestling takes us more into the capacity to handle intensity and handle conflict, and the dance takes us more into the capacity to deeply attune and to deeply listen. And if you combine them, then you have a person who can really meet another person in a deep way. And when you practice parkour, you sort of wrestle and dance with the world. And you have to, one of the things that I think is very pernicious in our culture is I think that there's ideological and academic strands, but it's also a technological thing. We don't know that there is a real. We do not have faith in reality, and faith not as faith like the Greek pistis, right? Like the that kind of faith. faithfulness, trust. We don't trust that there is truth that we can access and that we can rely on. And one of the things that's beautiful about parkour is I can say to myself, I can do this jump, and I will either be proven correct or I will be proven incorrect. And I will have some consequence if I'm proven incorrect. And I can do that over and over and over again. And then I can develop faith in my capacity to say that. Yesterday I did a jump that was about 20 feet off the ground. If I'd fallen, right, like I would have had a very bad day.
Yeah.
I'd
have to get a new podcast guest. This won't work at all.
Like I'm trained enough and fit enough that like I wouldn't kill myself. I might like fracture an ankle or super bruised heels or break some bones in my feet. But it'd be a really, really, really bad consequence, and I don't want to do it, right? But I was able to go up there, look at the jump, and say, I have 100% confidence that I'm going to be okay when I do this jump. And that was a responsible decision for me to make because I've put 20 years into this practice. And that kind of relationship with reality, it affords us the sense that there is a way to apprehend reality, to grasp reality, to be grounded into reality that can afford us a real relationship to truth. And if we can do it it is true that I can do the jump, then there's other questions that are maybe more difficult, where we can at least enter the process with the faith that there is a answer that can be found. And we can look for the signals, right? Like when I don't get the same kind of feedback from my work and my relationship or my marriage or my children that I get from a jump, right? If I subtly mess up today in relationship to my kids, it doesn't hurt the way that smashing my heels into a jump does.
Yeah.
And so it's very easy to become insensitive or to miss the signal as it develops. So you have to cultivate the sensitivity. But through this process, I've been able to do that. And it's really profound. I want to tell you a little story if we have time for it. I went canyoneering. So I got up at 6 a.m. and drove 2 hours and hiked down into a canyon with a wetsuit on and a rock climbing harness and a rope with 3 of my friends. And we rappelled down 11 waterfalls and down climbed and jumped and slid down water slides for 6 hours.
Oh, yeah.
It was amazing. And I came back and like my body was crushed, right? Sore. Every muscle, my lower back is lit up. And I got home and my kids had gone with their grandma to a wildlife sanctuary, and they got to pet a lynx and do a bunch of cool stuff like that. And so they were just over the moon. So they're just like, bah, 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 Dad, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened, which is great, right? Like I'm so happy for them. And at the same time, I'm so overwhelmed and my nervous system is so baked by the end of this day. And I haven't eaten dinner yet. And they're just like, bah, 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 bah. And then my oldest daughter says like, Dad, I have bad news. The dog bit me. Okay. I don't believe her. I don't believe that this dog would bite her, but something happened and I'm trying to figure it out. So she's like, oh, it happened to Mom too. And I'm like, I can see that she's not injured. I'm like trying to track my wife down and get her to tell me the real story because I don't trust the story that's coming out. Because we've had dogs that bite and we've had dogs that we've had to destroy because they bit people. And so I have this 10-month-old puppy who I do not want to have a dog that bites, right? Like this is a big problem for me. So between all those things, my emotions ramp up, right? And like eventually I find myself like lecturing, you can't say that. You can't say that a dog bit you and it nipped your fingers when I was trying to get food from you. Like you have to realize that what that means to me is I have to kill the dog, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so all this emotion's coming out of me. And I'm telling her what she needs to do to help me regulate my emotions.
Mm. Mm.
And about 5 minutes go by, and I'm able to get a little bit of quiet, and I'm able to realize that needs to be reframed, right? Yes, she can improve her communication, but my emotional reaction is actually not her responsibility. It's the result of this whole set of things that brought me to that moment, which are choices that I made.
Yep.
And so I was able to say, like, hey, guys, this happened. I just need to acknowledge, like, I didn't show up the way that I need to as a father in that moment, right? Like, it's not your responsibility. What I should have said is, hey, it's really important to me to like make a distinction between the dog nipping you when it's trying to get some food and the dog actually biting you in aggression or fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and here's why that's so important to me. But in that moment when I was overwhelmed by emotion, I put the responsibility on her for my experience of emotion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, in the past, me and my oldest daughter, we've had these kind of conflicts a lot as she's entered puberty and she's developed her own political consciousness, and she's much more on the left and much more on the right, and various things have happened. And sometimes it's taken an hour, 2 hours for me to like make it to the other side and go back and do the proper emotional renegotiation with her. And she's been really upset and angry with me about how some of those have come around. And so then this time it took me about 5 minutes. And I was like, and when I said it, she's like, well, I was waiting for that.
Yeah.
And my wife said, look, isn't that great that you trust him enough now to know that he's going to come back to the table that way. And so I watch what happens now because I show up that way, right? What happens is, like 2 years ago, my oldest daughter and me were like angry cats circling ourselves in the house where we couldn't look each other in the eyes.
Yeah.
And now she walks into the house and she wants to tell me about her day, right? She wants to ask me questions. She doesn't get so reactive when I say something that is, more politically right wing or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so it's like that being able to be sensitized enough to see the process of the healing, to see the process of the growth of trust.
Yeah.
That's actually the jump landing.
Yeah. 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 Wow. That's
It's the
beautiful.
jump landing of the social relational realm. And I think, again, we just don't even know what that's like for most people to have, like, we know when we're having fun with somebody, we know when we're vibing with somebody, but when it starts to not work, what is the process that rebuilds trust? We don't have it. We go hide in our phones. We go find new friends. We go do these other things. We go start a new relationship, or we declare that we're poly and we have new relationships and we try to hold on to our old relationship and it doesn't actually hold on 90% of the time. And, we'll go get my needs met by somebody else. That's the kind of emotional strength and self-ownership and agency that we need to train people into, to offer them through practice. And to understand that as cool as it is to do a jump 20 feet off the ground, it's actually not the point. And everybody who's listening, who like admires the work that I do and maybe wants to get involved, but is scared, it's like, it doesn't matter if you ever do a jump like that, right? Yeah. It's just a place to go exercise mastery and to experience fun and to be motivated into a process of self-transformation. But then you got to go do the laundry.
Yeah. Then you got to talk with your daughter who doesn't politically agree with you. And she's waiting at the bottom.
Work, right? That's the real work, right? And, like I could have exited stage right from my family when it got difficult and said, hey, I've got this great work to do in the world. I can go travel. I could meet a new tribe of people who think that I'm the coolest, best guy in the world every couple of weeks and never do the deep and hard work of relationship. And a lot of people who become gurus in the physical space choose that lifestyle, but ultimately it doesn't rebuild society.
Yeah. Right.
It's not the pathway to the kingdom, in my opinion.
Yeah. Wonderful. So we are coming up on that time, and this feels like
Yeah.
a pretty good bookmark.
Sure.
I just want to say thank you. I mean, this is really cool to kind of get to know you a little bit more. And for me, it's a great thing as somebody who considers myself a leftist, you know, to be able to host you and to be able to engage with you and find common ground and actually celebrate the work that you're doing, and to be able to, just to be able to have this kind of interaction. I think this is actually a very healing thing on a lot of different layers, you know, and I think for my audience who typically gets a more left kind of presentation, you know, I hope that they open themselves up and really allow what you're bringing to the table to kind of settle into their minds a little bit. And, you know, I think we're going to get through it, you know, just the whole thing, you know, I really do. Really do. So
I
we
pray
can
for it every night.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you so much, Rafe. I do want to leave a little bit of a space for you to plug what you have coming up down the line and just how people can stay in touch with you.
Yeah. If anyone's interested in my work, you can find sort of our professional home at evolvemoveplay.com. We're kind of not super active right now. I'm on a little bit of a sabbatical. My aim is actually to start writing a book here soon. But I do have students all over the world now who are starting to teach. So Julio Hesse and Mark Nagesi are organizing some Evolve Move Play workshops in Europe. So those will be, you can find them by looking those guys up, or I think they'll be on our website. I share all their stuff on our Instagram as well as that comes up. One of my students, Charlie Holt, is running things through his own brand called Roots of Play. So highly recommend checking out Charlie. And then another one is Ben Metter. He's in the UK. And then Aaron Cantor and Kyle Koch are like core members of our team who teach around the United States. Kyle's pretty active on Instagram, so check out Kyle Koch, Charting Sparrow. Aaron is not, but he's available and he's incredible. Highly recommended for everyone in this space. So you can reach out to me if you want to do that. People can just reach out to info@evolvemoveplay.com with any questions. And then I'll be spending a lot of my time and energy on Substack, both the Evolve Move Play Substack and the Rafe Kelley Substack going forward. And we also have like a lot of really cool stuff coming up on our YouTube channel.
Yeah. Are you still doing the podcast? I noticed you had that moving, and I don't remember when the last episode was.
Yeah, I have not been recording. I always kind of have to take a break over the summer when I'm teaching a lot. I do expect to get back to the podcast. I kind of need to reconsider what I want to do with the podcast because there's a lot of stuff happening in the podcast space right now. It's just sort of like become very, very busy, and I can't keep up with anybody that I like in their podcast. And so I'm like, and then there's so much pressure to be like producing all the time to feed the algorithm, and I just don't want to be a slave of the content algorithm. I want to create things that really, really matter to me, and so I don't know how to balance that yet. So that's I'm kind of reimagining my relationship to podcasting right now, but there will be a time when it comes back in some way.
Wonderful. Yeah, I feel the same way in terms of not wanting to be a slave to what you really need to do. And I've probably shot myself in the foot, but I'm like, I want to create work that is meaningful to me, and I don't want to lose my appreciation and my motivation for it, which doing like weekly, bi-weekly, it's crazy. But all right, Rafe, thank you again so much for joining me. We'll keep in touch.
Sounds good. Thanks, Brett. Have a good day.
You too. All right, everybody, that was the episode. Thank you so much for listening all the way through until the end. As always, I do make this show for you in particular. Once more, that was Rafe Kelley. You can follow him over at Evolve Move Play or evolvemoveplay.com if you want to check out some of his more in-depth content. He's got some really good blogs and Substacks and all that. I really recommend peeping what he's putting out there. If you want to support this show, once more, you can head on over to patreon.com/21stcenturyvitalism and consider becoming a patron. Beyond that, Instagram, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Facebook, the whole thing. I'm everywhere. I'm everywhere you want me to be, and probably in some places you don't want me to be. So I'll leave that up to you on how you choose to interact. So thank you again so much, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Take care.